of SGP is owned by the public,
Sige,
and then
explain.
SGP only owns
Um,
through three
okay.
layers of ownership.
Yes.
60% of NGCP. So 20% of 60%, sir, is
We're referring to economic interest. Mr. Chairman, I'm also bad at math. I'm really sorry. Can I turn this over to the corporate
a
secretary?
sickness of us lawyers po, no?
So, as a guide, so the total SGP direct ownership in NGCP is 9.24% because there's also, SGP also owns preferred shares in NGCP, so that's 9.24. Direct ownership of SGP in NGCP through preferred shares. And then the total SGP indirect ownership in NGCP is 36.5%. It is computed through One Taipan, which owns 67% of Monte Oro, which in turn owns 27.23% of NGCP. So that's 18.24, and the same percentage is also for the Pacifica 21 and Calaca, 18.24. So the total direct and indirect ownership is 45.73%.
45.73% owned by SGP.
Correct.
And
Direct
how
and
much of
indirect.
that is owned by the public?
Okay. So if we do, there are 5 components, no, to get to the.
Mr. Chair, isn't it much simpler to disperse ownership by listing the shares of NGCP instead of all of this corporate gymnastics? The layering is what makes it so hard, Mr. Chair. And you, I'm sure, as your job as corporate secretary, I think this was intentional. Mr. Chair, the point of Section 8 is encourage accountability and transparency to the public by allowing them to participate in the economic fruits of their investment and also in ownership and control. Mr. Chair, the follow-on offering, this was preferred shares po, no?
No, the follow-on offering is common shares,
Common
in
shares
SGP.
in NGP. But SGP's direct ownership that was offered by NGCP, 9%, was preferred.
Correct.
Does preferred have ownership? Does
Yes.
preferred have voting rights?
Yes. Non-voting.
Non-voting rights. And in fact, what makes preferred shares so special po compared to common shares?
Well, in this case, it's special because it has priority as to dividends. It has, yeah. And I think that was the storyline of the FOO, was that the funds that you raised from the public, it will be reinvested into NGCP.
Mr. Chair, apologies. I'll just cut really quick po, no? You mentioned preference over dividends. But under your articles of incorporation, nakalagay po dito, the non-voting preferred shares shall not be entitled to any preference over the common shares in terms of dividends and other economic rights. In this specific case, I hope we talk
Yes,
particularly
correct.
about this. So, wala na pong voting, wala rin preference over dividends. What makes your non-voting shares, what makes your non-voting preferred shares so special?
I have the features here. If you could give me a few minutes.
In relation
I'll
po
pull it.
at least to the 2 factors, economic fruits and ownership and control. If you could please give us the salient points.
Yes, just give me a few minutes.
Mr. Chair, while waiting po, no, I just want to share that that's the problem po siguro that we saw. The SGP, through multiple layers, made it very hard for the public to participate in ownership of NGCP. Aside from that, by making it appear that SGP has direct ownership, they did it through preferred, non-voting preferred shares, which don't even have preference in dividends. It seems to be a lot of corporate gymnastics to maintain control for the select few. And that's why I think even if there's colorable compliance with the Section 8 in terms of whether it was IPO or through the second mode, which is what they did through the listing of a company for 30%, the intent of the law was not achieved. They went through extra measures to make sure that our public cannot participate, cannot benefit. And all of this was handed to them on a silver platter. This is a natural monopoly. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, just to manifest po, no, we've handled a lot of franchises in this committee. But most of the time, we're talking of media, we're talking about distribution utilities. They're a dime a dozen. But this one is this is the only transmission company that we have in this country. Yet this is what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe ready na po
Mr.
sila.
Chairman, please, for purposes of compliance with Section 5, RA 9511, dispersal of ownership, actually, we do not need to issue that preferred shares. We issued those preferred shares as a vehicle by which we will funnel the proceeds of the FOO from SGP directly to NGCP. Because there were allegations that the shareholders might pocket the proceeds of the FOO in the amount of 12 billion pesos. We assured the public that this will go straight to NGCP for its CAPEX projects. That's why we issued those preferred shares. But for purposes, Mr. Chairman, of complying with RA, with section, with the public dispersal of public ownership, it's not necessary.
Well, Mr. Chair, that's my point. We're going through all this legalese. Let's just cut the discussion short. How much of the public, how much of NGCP is publicly owned? I don't think it's 20%. And that's the very point that I'm driving at po, no? And even worse, Mr. Chair, I understand we'll go through that po, no? And I'd like to go more into the yung board meeting situation that we were talking about earlier. Mr. Sagayo, you mentioned you're a director ever since po, no?
2010.
2010, which is most of it po, no? I pioneer. So the board has always been composed of 10 seats, tama po ba?
Tama po.
And it has always been composed of 4 Chinese national board directors.
Correct.
Yet, how much percent po is owned currently by the state grid? 36%?
Common shares, actually it's 40%, Mr. Chairman.
40% pa rin?
Yes, 40% common shares.
Because this is what happened when we added the preferred shares po siguro,
Yeah.
no?
Oo.
So and the preferred shares don't count.
No, no.
Okay, so
Oo.
that's why we have the 40%.
Yes,
and the
40%. Yes.
And generally, when we have board meetings, the quorum would be 50% plus 1.
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
Is that the case with NGCP?
Def- yes, Mr. Chairman. Yes.
Mr. Chair, according to your bylaws on Section 7, 7 directors shall constitute a quorum.
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
Attorney Sagayo, sir, po, no, Mr. Chair, in the history of all of your board meetings, would you ballpark figure how many meetings were those po?
We have a meeting once every quarter.
Once every quarter. And that's 4 times a year. And
Correct.
for
Yes, Mr.
more
Chairman.
than a decade. And how many board meetings did you not have a Chinese director present?
As far as I can recall,
Never.
most, if not all of the board meetings that I attended, everybody was present.
Everybody was present.
I just recall one instance when I wasn't, no, I think Abeya. Almost everyone is present. Almost all meetings, everybody's present.
Then that's good to know. So your safeguard was not needed. Because po, Mr. Chair, I believe Section 7 is a safeguard to ensure that at least 1 Chinese director is present.
It never happened, Mr. Chairman.
No, it never happened because there's full attendance. So there's always been a Chinese director.
Yes, of
But
course. Yes.
technically, if you want to really cut down, if you really wanted to have a board meeting of just the 6 Filipino directors, which in normal circumstances would constitute a quorum, you cannot because you need 7 directors. Therefore, 1 Chinese director must always be present. Is that correct, Mr. Attorney Sagayo?
Yeah. Oh, for on the third. Second, yeah. If we can, yes. There's a, if we do not get the quorum first meeting, we delay, then immediately 7.
Attorney Sagayo, I apologize po, no? I'll just cut you short. I'm not asking about when there's
Okay.
not quorum. I'm just asking, my question is plain and simple. Could you have a board meeting without 1 Chinese director?
After the adjournment.
Yes. It's possible, Mr. Chairman. Assuming in the first meeting there's no quorum, we delay, we adjourn. During the next meeting, 6 is the
Apologies.
majority.
In a regular
Regular.
meeting, the first meeting, you can't. You need 7. It's